Okay, welcome back. Sorry for the quick little break. I do want to remind everybody, if you're at home or if you're at the branches, if you're at the branch, you will have an administrator or somebody who's going to moderate. Send in your questions. Don't wait till we get to that segment. If you have a question, please send them in to aos@rockymtn.com. And if you do that, we'll make sure that these guys get those questions and we'll go over those on air. We've already got a couple coming in. Again, studio audience, please, lots of interaction would be awesome. It's one of the things that we struggle a little bit with is getting that interaction with the virtual crowd. So you guys are here to fill that gap. So with that, to talk about feeders is John Thompson. Take it away, John.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm John Thompson, cash crop specialist with New Holland. Okay, so the feeder house on the New Holland combine. There we go. First of all, our feeder system is designed to feed the combine very efficiently. It's what we like to call matched width feeding. So what that means is the width of the feeder house matches the width of the thresher of the combine. Now, depending on the model of combine you have, is going to depend on the width of the feeder house. We don't just stick one feeder house on for everything. So in the New Holland world, we have 3 different feeder houses right now that we are available. So we have our Class 7 combine, which is a 17-inch rotor. That combine would have a 40-inch wide feeder house. Our wide body combines, our Class 8, 9, and 10, have a 22, or pardon me, with the 22-inch rotors, have a 50-inch feeder house. The third feeder house goes with the CX combine, and it's a 60-inch feeder house to match the width of the cylinder in the CX combine. Either way, any machine, we match the width of the feeder to the thresher. So there's no transition where we need to funnel it down to get into the thrasher. It's straight through. The other thing that we do is it's what we call an undershot design, where we feed the material out of the feeder house right into the bottom side of the rotor, and it takes it away and it's gone. So it's a very efficient feeding system. And this little illustration right here shows that where we've got the width of the feeder matches the width of the rotors. Okay. So we have 2 different types of feeder houses on our rotary combine, and actually in the room here we have both here. This legacy machine over here has what we call the advanced stone protection system, or the electronic stone trap, and this new machine over here has the DFR system on it, or the mechanical system. So I'll quickly talk about both. The ASP system, we don't offer that from the factory anymore on the Class 8, 9, and 10 combines. But I am going to mention it because there's lots of older machines out there that still have it, so it is still a valid discussion. So what happens here is, what we're going to talk about here specifically is the stone trap system. So the way this system works is you've got this drum down on the bottom down here, and it feeds material up in like this. Now that drum down on the bottom is a solid drum. So what it's designed to do is take rocks and push them into the floor. And then there is a sounding board in the floor down here which would kick the door open. Now when that door kicks, it shuts down the feeder house, and then it'll alert you and you have to stop and deal with the rock. Whatever it takes to get that rock out of there. What I recommend to do is use the feeder reverser and back everything out. Make sure you've got all your rocks and your debris cleaned out. And then you will raise the feeder house all the way up and reset the door. At that point, you need to lower the feeder house back down, and then you can restart the feeder house. And then you should be able to resume harvesting. You have to make sure that you lower that feeder house back down before you fire up the feeder house, because if you leave it all the way up, there is actually a cable that is tied to the back end of the door here over to the axle, which closes it when you raise the feeder house up. So if you leave the feeder house all the way up when you fire it up, and if there is still a rock or something stuck in there, there's virtually no stone protection. It'll just feed everything in. So just make sure you're aware of that. So what I like to recommend is just get into the habit of every time you fire this feeder house up, lower it down. On these feeder houses as well, this is your tension spring. This is your height adjustment here for the front drum. This is on the side of the feeder house. And then also make sure that this spring here is there and in good condition. That spring is there to hold the drum down and keep it from bouncing around in there. This is the DFR system that we will find on the new combine. Basically what it does is it puts this drum here between the feeder house and the rotors. It's a mechanical system with a sump underneath it. So when a rock comes in, it just pushes it down into the sump and you can just continue harvesting. You don't have to stop and deal with the rocks every time. It is a good idea to make sure you open it on a regular basis, especially if you're cutting on the ground or if you know you're in a rocky field. Okay, on this slide here, what we have is we're going to show the drive quickly. So right here on the left hand, this would be the right hand side of the combine. This is the drive belt for the DFR. There's 2 speeds on it, high and low. For the most part, I like to recommend we just leave it in low speed, or would be the 640 RPM setting. That pretty much works for everything that we're doing here. There is a slowdown kit if you need for peas, coarse grains, that sort of thing, which would drop that thing down to 550 to help prevent cracking and chipping of material. Come on, I'm too far away from the thing. Chain tension, this is the last thing I wanted to talk about here, and this applies to both feeder houses. This mechanism on the side here with this spring, you turn the nut down till the spring matches the gauge. That is the tension on the feeder chain. Make sure that that is checked on a regular basis and that you keep the chain properly tensioned. This little block here, now I mentioned it earlier, that one there would set the height of your drum. Follow the book settings for that. It'll give you a guidelines of how to set it for the crop that you're harvesting. The last thing I wanted to mention here that kind of gets forgot about is bent feeder slats. Make sure that you're dealing with bent feeder slats and that if you know you're in rocky land, or if you know you're dropping lots of rocks out of your stone trap, you should probably be checking your chain, make sure you're not bending slats. A bent slat will accelerate wear on the chain. It's a good idea to get them dealt with. Either take them out or replace them. If you have a couple in there that are bent, and you know they're bent, you're better off to just take them out and run without, and replace them when you can, than you are to keep going with a bent one in there, okay? And that's all I had for the feeder house. Thank you very much.
Okay. Better get on
You
camera.
want me back here? Okay. Sorry about that.
All right. Well, so thanks, John, for that. So we're going to go into, we're going to do this periodically throughout the day. We're going to give everybody an opportunity to ask questions, take questions that have come in from online. So I guess I'll open it up right now, guys. Is there any questions now? I know there was one up here about updates. What was your question earlier?
I was wondering if there's an update kit for the crossauger off and on.
Okay, so the question was, is there an update for the crossauger off and on? Is that correct? Okay, go ahead.
So right now that option is for model year 22, which is next year, and that's when it's going to start coming from the factory. At this point, there isn't one. Not to say that we might not look at it in the future, but to start with, no. I don't believe there is one in the works at the moment, but I mean, I don't know what the future holds for that.
Okay, is there anything else? Another question, guys? No?
I think you did ask about updates too. So always remember that software is always upgradable backwards, right? So your model year 21s or your model year 20 should be able to upgrade to model year 22 software. That's important.
Okay, so we do have one coming in from one of the branches, or sorry, this is someone at home it sounds like, so 16TS16. Hello, I have a CR with ASP and FD70 in damp conditions. I seem to struggle with getting it to feed smoothly between the header and feeder house, more than other brand combines running the same header side by side. I am a custom harvester and run alongside all combine brands. I was wondering if there were recommended front drum settings or other things I can do to minimize feeder issues.
I guess the first thing I would look at is to make sure, now I'm not a MacDon rep. I'm not quite sure exactly how to set the MacDon head up exactly, but I can say this much. The transition area from the MacDon header into the feeder house, there is some filler plates that go on there, and this goes for any make of header, ours as well. Make sure that those match the width of the opening of the feeder house. So that would be step number one. Step number two, I guess, would be to make sure that you have the front drum set at the recommended height according to the book, depending on the crop that you're harvesting.
Okay.
Is there
anything else?
retractable fingers on that? Because your retractable finger timing would be important. too,
Yeah,
for
and
the
again,
crop
that's on the
protein.
MacDon
Yeah,
head.
I'm not sure.
I can't really speak to that. I mean,
Okay.
that would be probably be up to the MacDon people
Yeah.
to respond to that. But from that point into the combine, I can kind of say that, because I mean that will apply with not just a MacDon head, but with any header that you would put on there.
Okay, perfect. So what we'll do to answer that question as well is we'll actually get back to you via email. We'll send that off to the MacDon people and see if they've got anything to add on that. So we've got another one coming in. When should I remove
Half lengths.
half links from feeder? Jane.
Very good question. I'm just going to back up on my slide here, because that's actually a very good question. Okay, so on this adjusting mechanism right here, where you see this number 1 here, in here there is actually, so that's the bolt that goes all the way through here. There's actually a little sleeve that just spins freely on there. As you tighten up the chain, this gap in here will start to close down. And when it closes down onto that sleeve, it's time to pull a half link out. That's kind of that's your indicator for a half link. Is that little sleeve in there?
Okay, good.
Yep.
Believe, just checking, is that the last question? Okay, so that's the last question that's come in so far. Again, aos@rockymtn.com. That will send those questions right into us. We'll get those answers as best we can. And yes, we'll move on to our next thing. And we'll just have about a 30-second little quick break here.